Today is Nate Rowan, who's Director of Communications for the Red Wings. He's been doing some excellent work in correcting some of the Red Wings official records. How long have you been with the Wings now, Nate?
This is my 5th season.
5 years, excellent.
Yep.
He does a super job with communications. You still doing Facebook and Twitter?
Helping out, but we have
Helping
a
out.
full-time person for that.
Okay. He used to do those part of his duties. Game notes are in his duties, and if you've ever seen the Red Wings game notes, they are phenomenal. So definitely major league quality there. So, without further ado, bring up Nate.
Thanks, Ryan, for having me. I know about half of you. I've met about half of you before today. If I haven't met you yet, if you wouldn't mind stopping by, introducing yourself so I can get to know you, you people. I hope that Ryan would invite me back. But before we get started, I'll kind of give you my background in baseball. I grew up in Minnesota. I grew up a Twins fan. I'm still a Twins fan. Gary, every couple of weeks, will try to stump me with a 91 World Series trivia question. He doesn't stump me very often. That's my go-to. But I grew up a Twins fan. I went to college in Minnesota, not the University of Minnesota, but I did an internship in Kansas City with an independent league baseball team. I did the Arizona Fall League for 2 falls. I did the Norfolk Tides as an internship in 2013. I was with the Royals in 2014 when they lost in the World Series, and then 2015 was my first year here with the Red Wings. So all those have been doing basically communications, media relations, dealing with statistics. So this is kind of right up my alley. So this is how I got started with statistics. I used to write by hand a mock 162 game major league schedule in a notebook when we would go to visit my grandparents. We had a 2-hour car ride each way. So I would basically write out an entire box score for the Minnesota Twins for 162 games. And that's how I got started with baseball stats. So I woke up every morning, I would go into the newspapers and scour the box scores. That kind of led into hockey statistics, which I help out with RIT. Their TV broadcasts, I help them with that. And then I'm a big poker player, so stuff like pot odds, if anyone's a gambler, and house edge, that sort of thing. So I deal with numbers in pretty much all aspects of my life. So this is how I got started with kind of what I would say is some of these will be correcting records, some will be we're finding things that were not documented previously. The first time that I ran into something that was not documented very well was we had a player, Mitch Garver, hit 3 home runs on the last day before the All-Star break in 2017. And so the International League puts together a record book that has all of no-hitters, 3 home run games, kind of rare feats. And the last time that a Rochester hitter at home hit 3 home runs in a game was 1976, or so we thought. So in that instance, I'm doing my job to try to get the information to the broadcasters and the press box and all that stuff. And so I'm on my way to Cooperstown with my parents. It's the first time they'd come out to visit me. So we're driving down to see Cooperstown, and I get an email from Ryan. And Ryan says, hey, Cal Ripken hit 3 home runs in a game in 1981, and he did it at Silver Stadium. So I'm basically typing up a press release that I now have to change because Garver was named the batter of the week. So Ryan sends me this press clipping from the Democrat Chronicle, and clearly Cal Ripken hit 3 home runs in a game. So we had to basically update our record. So it's not that in this case we're correcting a record, it's just that a feat had happened that was not chronicled. So finding things like this, and in the course of my research, I realized that there are things out there that we still may not know about with either the Red Wings or Rochester baseball history. And the only way to find stuff is by continuing to do research, read articles, read books, and see if there's things that have maybe not been chronicled before. So that's how I got started kind of updating stuff, and so Ryan's to thank for that. The first project that I started working on, and I know it's hard to read stuff unfortunately, but the project that I started working on was we never had a one location where all of our statistics for our hitters, pitchers, and fielding statistics compiled in one location. So we had it kind of Baseball Reference, Fangraphs, Baseball Cube, really anywhere that had baseball stats. Major League Baseball Advanced Media came on the scene in 2005 and took over the official statistics of minor league baseball and Major League Baseball. So they are handling all this stuff now, but before that, it was kind of a bunch of different groups that kind of changed from year to year. So I was in the process of putting everything together, and it wasn't until I hit 1980 that I realized that the records that have been posted were not accurate. And when I say that, 1982 has, this is a pitcher statistics, basically they have thirds of an inning for guys, right? 1980, there's no, everybody's an even inning number. So when I got to that, that's kind of odd. That's very rare to see that every pitcher who appeared in the game or in a season had an even number of innings pitched. So it was very strange to me. So I started doing some digging and realized that they were the statistics, they were rounding down or up based on a third of an inning or 2/3 of an inning. So Mike Boddicker was listed on Baseball Reference at 190 innings, when in reality he had 190 and a third innings. You can see a bunch of the guys here. You know, Randy Barbaugh had 26. He was at 25 and 2/3. So basically, how I found this was I went through every box score from 1980 and calculated it basically tallied it by hand and through an Excel spreadsheet to get our totals, and then I had to make sure that our totals matched the team totals that were reported to the league. So some of these guys had earned run averages that were not accurate because the earned runs were being tallied against an incorrect innings total. So that was the first time where I really had to do some deep research. And so in the course of the last 2 off seasons, I've only gotten through 1980, 1979, and I'm in the process of doing 1978. Obviously, with my job with the Red Wings, I am very busy during the summer, so it's hard to do something like this because ideally you sit down and you focus in on this entirely, where your attention is not drawn away, because there's a lot of the potential for errors if you are not focused or you're just not in the zone. So I try to, that's how I try to kind of chronicle that stuff. So thankfully, Dorothy Fox had a bunch of old clippings and box scores that she gave to the team. Gary has some of those in his back office. So I was able to reference all of these years since 1979 against her stuff. It's harder and harder now to have ways to verify it, so I'm going through not only our newspaper that would have the box score, but also the opponent's box score to make sure that it matches up, because people had to enter the box scores back in the day by hand. There wasn't a copy-paste sort of ability, so there was room for human error in box scores, and so occasionally there's box scores that you'll find that says the guy maybe had 10 hits when in reality he only had 1. There was just an extra 0 that was bumped. So we're trying to verify that, and it's becoming more and more challenging as we go further and further back. So one thing that I just recently discovered, probably in January, I went back through my email, and I had emailed Ryan and Joe, who's the president of the Rochester Baseball Historical Society, and Gary, that there was a no-hitter in Rochester's baseball history that was not accounted for. And as far as I could tell, there was nowhere that popped up. So from the International League's website, they chronicle all the no-hitters that have happened in the league, the first of which that was verified was 1884, and it goes all the way up through last season. So I'm in the process of doing research on our manager win totals. So I have, in our media guide this year for the first time, we have win-loss totals for our managers in their history, broken down by wins. And then it says why they left the position, whether they were fired, resigned, anything like that, and then when the new guy took over, and if there were any player managers that temporarily stood in between that period. So in the process of that, I figured out that in 1890 we threw a no-hitter when we were a member of the American Association.
Yep.
So here's the clipping from the Democrat and Chronicle that year, and the box score, and the article in which a lefty named Liddell Titcomb was he threw one of the first no-hitters in Rochester baseball history, but as far as we knew, there was no record of it because we were relying on the International League to supply this information for us. And so that's when I realized that we needed to do a better job of chronicling this stuff ourselves and not relying on other groups. So it's been listed that we've thrown, that Rochester professional baseball history, there's 25 no-hitters or perfect games, when in reality there's 26. And the reason that this one was not accounted for because in 1890 we weren't in the International League. We were an American Association club in the major leagues. So that was my first, I guess, true big discovery, and I emailed Ryan. I think that's kind of what kicked off the topic for this talk here. So that's kind of what I have today. I don't know if anybody has any questions, but there's a lot of stuff that I'm working on with the team. In the media guide, we have jersey history that Paul Bielowitz, Joe Torito, and Craig Brown have helped me compile. So we basically have the Red Wings jersey history with color photos, either replicas or renderings that Craig Brown has done since 1928. We have logo history, our primary logo history in color in the media guide for the first time. I mean, basically, I've tried to get as much information put into that media guide that was not in there before that I think that's important. So working with Ryan and everybody with the Rochester Baseball Historical Society. Doug has done an extensive amount of work on the postseason history for the Red Wings, so I'm in the process of compiling now box scores to put in the postseason section of the media guide, and a lot of that's going through newspapers and just basically typing the box scores by hand. So I'm through 2006, so I only have 3 series done, but it's a lot of work to put that stuff together. So with Doug's help, we do have every game that the Red Wings have played in the postseason since 1928. Is that right?
Awesome.
Give or take. But we have, then it's broken.
About the two?
What's that?
Did you ever find about the Eastern?
Yeah, so the International League has listed as playing a 2-game series against Albany, and couldn't find any record of it. And I emailed Doug and I said, hey, I'm trying to find this information. I have no record of it. And so Doug did some digging and he couldn't find anything. And the International League doesn't have any record of it. So it's possible that that may not have happened. It still could have, but we just haven't found it. So it's just verifying records can be extremely difficult the farther you go back. And using the newspapers.com website, which is what I've used frequently, it's harder to find what you're looking for the farther you go back. So that's my presentation. That's what I've been working on the last 2 off seasons, and I hope to be able to come back here in the next year or so and have some updates on things that I found. So, does anyone have any questions for me? Yes.
There's so many new statistics going on in all sports. It seems like they're, statisticking everything.
Right.
And you've had some experience with RIT hockey.
Mm-hmm.
How do they do this up in the press box? How many people do they have charting players coming in and off
Sure.
the ice, spending so much time in the offensive zone? You got so many things going on, more so I'd say in hockey.
Sure. So I help out on the TV broadcast. So I help graphics build in-game graphics for if a goal gets scored or promotions or anything like that. But then during the game, a lot of times the graphic person isn't a hockey person; they're a technical person. So they learn hockey as the season goes on. But early in the season, I'm telling them what to type and how to type it. The RIT team, the league is not required to have on-ice time. So in the American Hockey League now, that's like the Amherst, that's required by the league to not only keep track of that, but then post it after the game. RIT doesn't require that, but each team then has people up in there. They have a coach's booth at RIT, and so they have probably 4 or 5 people that are charting various things, including time on ice. And then the statistics like plus minus, so if you're on the ice for a goal, 4 or against, then you get a plus or a minus depending on that. And that is officially handled by the sports information director.
Things like block shots and scoring chances.
Yeah, and so there's like, they have an official score just like baseball does. And at the Division I level, a lot of times it's just the sports information director. Like at the Sabres, it's an independent person that the league pays. We pay our official scores, the league pays our official scores. We don't pay, even with the Red Wings. So, hockey has, I would say, they keep changing every year with different advanced metrics, if that's what you want to call it. I think they're on the right track with that. But there are a lot of numbers, and if you don't understand them, it can be pretty confusing.
Thank you.
Yeah, Ryan?
How easy is it to get the league to update records? So for instance, like, you have to add the Cal Ripken 3 home run game, and then have you tried at all to get them to change like the innings pitch totals?
Yeah, so they are kind of sticklers on that because they're basically like, well, if it's been reported like this for how many years, how come you're the first one to notice something? And I said, well, if you want me to send you all of our box scores, I can show you that the totals are wrong. And so I think their issue is that if ours are wrong, everybody else in the league is probably wrong too. So the no-hitter thing came about because their website lists who the no-hitter was thrown against, but doesn't say where it was thrown, if it was at home or if it was done on the road. So I was compiling in our media guide. We had listed all of our no-hitters, but we didn't have what their lines were. Were they 7-inning no-hitters? Were they 9-inning no-hitters? Like Mariano Rivera threw a 5-inning perfect game against us when he was coming up with Columbus. And so I wanted to put the pitching lines with each no-hitter and perfect game. And at some point, I think it was in the 60s maybe, I came across a no-hitter that we threw that referenced this 1890 no-hitter, which is how it led me to that. So a lot of it is just going through, reading game stories, reading box scores, and hopefully, I hope there's no DNC people in the audience today, but I fear that at some point, if you want to go back and verify stuff, there's no way to do it. They don't hardly put the box score in there. There's never a game story anymore. So I rely on newspapers significantly to do what I do, especially with these research projects, because it's all I got. So they've been sticklers about changing stuff, but I did get them to change where our no-hitters were thrown or the ones that were thrown against us, thankfully. So.
One of the things I found interesting when you were talking about innings pitched, and it didn't make spreadsheets easy, because in box scores, 190 and a third is listed as 190.1,
You're right.
not .333.
Right.
And 190 and 2/3 is listed as 190.2.
Right.
It took me a while to realize,
Yeah.
when I was doing spreadsheets and calculating things, why aren't my numbers working?
Well, and so it's interesting when you go through old box scores. I don't know if that 1891 has it in there, but they don't have it. They don't have pitching lines. They basically, back in the day, they used to list the pitching stuff underneath here, and it would say walks against, hits against, hit batters against, and then it would say off, whatever the pitcher name is. And so that's like pitching lines were never, way back when, were not broken out like you see in today's box scores. And so at some point, they stopped including, like they have fielding statistics in the box scores way back in the day, so putouts, assists, and errors. All that stuff was included. Now, when you got to a certain point in like the 70s or the 80s, they stopped doing that, and there was no fielding stats listed. So the only fielding stats that I have are season-long stats. And so unfortunately, unless I can verify it, I have to treat whatever's been reported as that's what it is, unless I can figure out that there's been an error or something. But they used to do so it had to be, I forget the exact name of the equipment that they used, but it was like typeset. And so the 2/3 was listed with it was very small, and it was clearly like someone tried to just make it work in the file. And then there were other times where it wasn't listed, they didn't have it at all. So you'd have guys with totals where our starter would go 6 innings and the reliever would go 2 2/3, and we were the home team, so we can't possibly have been walked off. So where's that other third of an inning? So then you could go to another box score, the team that we played against, in their newspaper, and then that would be listed, and they just forgot to put the third of an inning for our starter. So that's how I've basically been forced to verify stuff, is by using what I have at the DNC, and then the opponent's newspaper. And if they match up, then we're in pretty good shape, because that means 2 different people entered stuff the exact same way instead of, because that was done by hand, it wasn't just copy paste.
It's also a little frustrating because that stat will forever be an imperfect stat, because a pitcher could pitch to 4 batters, let's say, in an inning, but if he doesn't get out, it appears as if he never even played
Correct.
it.
Right, so the way that the box scores that BAM produces now, that you'll see if you go to the website, it'll say, if a guy gets taken out without getting an out, so he faces, it'll say, Duffy pitched to 4 batters in the 6th. So he may only have 5 innings listed on his pitching line, but it now it's supposed to be listed that he faced 4 guys. Back then, you really have no idea unless there's an article to accompany it. So that's how I've kind of verified that stuff. But the next step, as soon as I get through, I would like to get through the Orioles era for individual player stats, because then I can start to basically compile like franchise highs, franchise records. It's hard for us to say with certainty that there are certain franchise records without knowing all the records. And then from there, it would be individual game highs, so different occurrences of 2 triples in a game, 4 doubles in a game, just rare feats that right now we have no way of knowing without going through every single box score and looking at. Yeah.
The WAR seems to be the statistic that they really follow at a major league level. Are you
Right.
tracking that at the AAA level? Is that something that you maintain?
So it's not something that I maintain. There's a website called Fangraphs that does a really good job of compiling that. The hard thing with the minor leagues is, with that is it's all depending on, it's like there's league-based statistics, there's ballpark factors that are in that. There's more of that information available at the major league level, just because more people are dealing with that stuff. Minor League Baseball puts out park factors at the end of each season, so we can kind of see where Frontier Field ranks in terms, and generally Frontier Field has been a pitcher's park since it opened. There are parks like Charlotte's. Charlotte's was built in a space that wasn't big enough, so they had to adjust the distance out to the outfield. So there are more home runs in Charlotte most years than any other ballpark. But my point is that there's more information on ballpark factors, and that can be put into different calculations for some of those advanced statistics. And WAR is hard because a lot of our players here are what you would consider average players, most of our guys. And if they're not, they usually leave us once they get past that. Unfortunately, the tough thing with AAA is we lose our best players generally, and the guys we have that come back from the big leagues are not performing well up there. So we lose our hot guys and we kind of get some cold guys. But Fangraphs.com is a good website for that. And I just haven't figured out how to calculate it accurately. And so rather than post something I'm not sure about, I just have laid off doing it. Yeah.
What sort of staff does the International League have to verify the statistics that are being reported to them? I mean, there's so many teams in the league. Are they just accepting at face value what all the teams submit? Or do they have a staff that kind of goes about verifying things?
One guy. They have one guy, his name's Chris Sprague, and anytime I have questions with regard to that, I'll contact Chris, and he'll either tell me, hey, this doesn't match up, or yeah, that's right. The hard thing with him is I think some teams have been better about reporting their history than others. And so we have a long history. There are a lot of things that we're still missing in our archives with the Red Wings that just had not been kept in the past. So that's what I'm trying to get it so that if there's any questions about, from any other teams about the Rochester Red Wings, that we have the answer to it. I've asked questions and stuff with Ryan, I've talked with Doug and certain things. Ideally, I wouldn't have to ask them, we just would know that this is the case, but the league has one person. And that's not his only job. His title is league administrator, so he does a lot of different things, not just that. So unfortunately, when I have a request, like the last time a Red Wing hit 3 home runs in a game, it's not as much of a priority to him as it is for me, so it may be a couple days before I get an answer.
Very good, thank you so much.